In today's video, we're looking at 4 RRSP withdrawal strategies that could significantly reduce your tax burden. Throughout our countless chats with clients across Canada, we've seen these strategies work time and time again. Despite having substantial RRSP savings, many retirees seem to struggle to minimize their tax exposure during the withdrawal phase of their retirement. Luckily, there are a number of approaches that can help you solve this problem. So in this video, we'll break down the 4 most common RRSP withdrawal strategies or meltdown strategies that can reduce that tax burden. I'll explain how each one works to lower your tax bill, why they're so effective, who they're for, and then we'll look at a case to see what a kind of glorious meltdown or drawdown strategy might actually look like in real life. Seriously, it's a thing of beauty. So let's dive in. We've got to make sure we first understand how marginal tax brackets work and why that matters. So in Canada, your income is taxed progressively, right? That means the more you earn, the more you pay in taxes. Now, this is where marginal tax rates come into play. A marginal tax rate is the percentage of tax that you're going to pay on the next dollar of income that you earn. So for example, here in BC, the first $12,580 is going to be tax-free in 2024. And then you'll pay a marginal tax rate of 20% or so on income all the way up to $47,397. Now, once your income passes that threshold, the next portion of your income is going to be taxed at a higher rate, so 22.7% up to about 55K or 56K, and then 28.2% all the way up to about $95,000, so on and so forth. Now, here's why it matters for RRSP withdrawals. RRSP withdrawals are considered taxable income, right? You got a deduction on those dollars when they went into the account, but now when they come out, they're going to be fully taxable. So any money you take out will be added to your total income in the year that you take that withdrawal. Now, depending on how much you withdraw, it could push you up into a higher tax bracket, and that might result in more taxes. And this is why it's a big deal, because with careful planning, you can actually avoid getting hit with those higher tax rates and potentially even avoid kind of some other nasty problems like OAS clawback, which I'll touch on in a few minutes. And by the way, if we haven't ever met, my name's Steve Willems. I'm a practicing certified financial planner and wealth advisor with the Willems Wealth Planning Group out here in BC. We started this channel to help you plan for your own retirement, helping you think about how to plan and arrange your investments, your income streams, and ideally pay less tax along the way. With that groundwork on kind of marginal tax rates in place, let's dive into the 4 key RRSP withdrawal strategies that are available to you. Now, the first option is a spicy one. Let's call it a levered loan wash strategy. It's not the proper term, but we'll call it that. Now, full disclosure up front, this is absolutely an option. It can work, but it's riddled in risk, and I personally don't have any clients that do this, nor am I actually recommending this to anyone, but it can work, and so let's just take a look. So here's what happens with this strategy. You're going to borrow money to invest in income-producing assets that are living in a non-registered account, and you're going to use additional RRSP withdrawals to pay for the interest on that loan. So folks who do this will like the fact that the loan interest to borrow that money to invest is going to be tax deductible to them, and that's going to offset the taxes that are owed on the incremental amount of RRSP withdrawals. In a simple sense, you're kind of converting your tax-deferred RRSP dollars into more flexible non-registered dollars with the hope that the compounding effect will outpace the borrowing costs over time in that process. Now, it should go without saying that the risk here is pretty high. You're taking on debt at a time when typically most retirees are looking to reduce risk, not increase it. The success of this strategy obviously is then going to depend on the investment returns outpacing those borrowing costs, which is certainly by no means kind of guaranteed, right? You could do this on day 1, and then day 2, the market kind of lays a big whopper, right? That may be the start of a 10-year lost decade period, and you're personally liable for that loan. So that might not be a great situation. So for the inherent risk of kind of borrowing money and then relying on the investments to cover the cost, it's just going to make this a less ideal scenario for most retirees. It might be suitable for a small subset of people who are comfortable with the leverage and the risk after kind of doing all of that education, But for the vast majority, this is going to be too risky. Now, the second strategy, and certainly the more common strategy, is what we'll call a low income withdrawal strategy. So this is going to be an approach that's designed to trigger RRSP income in years when you find yourself in a lower tax bracket. And that's going to make the withdrawals just way more tax efficient because of that marginal tax rate stuff that we just looked at. So here's how it works. You'll make the withdrawals from your RRSP or maybe your RIF when your income or your spouse's income is abnormally low. So typically before other sources like CPP or OAS or maybe other pension incomes are activated. This can work especially well with non-working spouses who have perhaps already retired, and maybe they've got some value inside a spousal RRSP that you can tap on, and you haven't put money in there recently, and now you're going to kind of try to extract it out and kind of create that income when the income's already low, maybe even $0. So the goal here isn't to necessarily generate a massive pile of extra cash flow or like spending money, but to instead just use up the lower tax brackets while they're available here. We don't want to let them pass us by. So typically in this situation, one partner is still bringing in income and pension income splitting isn't yet available. You got to wait till 65 for that. And so this represents kind of extra cash, excess cash, that then gets recycled back into TFSAs or maybe into a non-registered flex account where the value can continue to grow, but just in a more tax efficient way. Now, why is this so effective? Well, by spreading out your withdrawals over several low income years, you're going to reduce the risk of facing higher tax bills that could come from larger RIF withdrawals if you were to delay. And this also helps reduce the mandatory RIF withdrawal amounts as well, right? Because once you reach 71, the next year you've got to start taking those minimum distributions. And by bleeding it out in the low income years, you're going to have more control over your taxable income in the later years too. We can only go over this strategy in just a little bit of detail here right now because we've got to move on to the next one. But we're going to break down this topic in more detail in another video in a few weeks' time. So to make sure you don't miss out, hit that subscribe button now. And the third strategy is what I'll call the deferred withdrawal strategy, which is actually quite different than the last approach of using up those low income years. Now, instead of triggering withdrawals early, this strategy is going to do the opposite. It's going to focus on delaying those RRSP withdrawals as long as possible, often until mandatory RIF conversion at the age of 71. And here's the thinking, right? By deferring those withdrawals, you maximize the primary benefit of that money being in the RRSP in the first place, right? Sweet, sweet tax deferred compounding. And you're going to push that out as long as possible. Now, this is going to be a common strategy for folks who have other income sources, right? Pensions, investment income, other types of savings, and they don't need to tap onto their RRSPs right away. Now, this is a meaningfully different approach than that last approach that we just looked at, right? While the low income withdrawal strategy had you kind of taken smaller withdrawals early in retirement, or maybe even before you were even retired, particularly during those low income years to avoid higher taxes in the future, this approach is going to delay those withdrawals to maximize the tax sheltered growth and potentially increase the pre-tax size of the nest egg before initiating those required RIF withdrawals. Now, there's going to be pros and cons with this strategy, of course, right? On the pro side, generally, more time equals more money. And so giving those investments more time to grow without being taxed, that's generally, on average, going to work out in your favor. And so this can work well for higher income retirees who don't need that immediate income and can wait until they need to actually access the funds down the road. Now, on the con side, by deferring too long, you can actually lead to larger mandatory RIF withdrawals later, which could push you up into higher tax brackets in your 70s, and as a result, could actually result in some OAS clawback surprises as well. So you got to keep an eye on that. Just before we move on, if you'd like help figuring out which of these RRSP meltdown strategies makes the most sense for you, I'll put a link in the description below and you can grab a time on the calendar and me and my team will take a look at your exact situation and help you come up with a game plan. Now, the fourth strategy is what I would call the blended withdrawal strategy. And the name kind of gives it away, right? In this case, it's all about balancing these income sources to keep your taxes and your withdrawals stable throughout retirement. Now, this strategy is going to be more flexible. It's going to aim to optimize your retirement income by drawing from multiple accounts, not just one account, to maintain a steady tax rate. We're solving for a steady tax rate here. The key is to keep your withdrawals within a certain targeted tax bracket every single year. So that way you're not pushed up into higher marginal tax rates unnecessarily. So what you're going to pragmatically do here is you're going to top up your income to the edge of your tax bracket by making additional RSP withdrawals in the years when you still have room before hitting that next tax bracket. So 2 quick benefits here, and I'll cover why it's so effective. Then I'll show you a super quick case study so you can kind of see what this looks like. So when you do this, you're going to be smoothing out your income in the government's eyes, right? So instead of facing kind of big tax spikes later in life from those mandatory RIF withdrawals, this is going to smooth it out over time, and it's going to reduce those surprises. So check mark there. And second, doing this proactively should also help to protect your old age security, as you can hopefully avoid your taxable income being pushed up too high. Now, who is this for? Well, this is going to be for folks who want to maintain some flexibility and keep their taxable income just more predictable. But this is also for people who have a mix of different account types, right? Non-registered, TFSA, RRSP, and they want to optimize for the tax efficiency of each one of those specific accounts. And admittedly, this is our preferred way of structuring retirement income streams. So I mentioned a quick case. Let's dive into that just to illustrate what I'm talking about. Let me reintroduce you to Marty and Jen. We've looked at them in the past. We won't get into the details this time with all kind of the assumptions and all that. We're just going to keep it like really, really simple. But I wanted to show you, this is what a blended withdrawal strategy is going to look like when you actually implement this type of planning. So they're going to be loading up some extra RIF draws in early retirement because those pension sources are going to be starting up. And that's essentially option 2 that we already looked at. But we're also still topping them up from their non-registered account, as we can get them the cash they need at a lower tax rate when we're drawing from those accounts. But then when CPP and OAS turn on, we see the spending is still the same, but the RIF draws have stepped down a little bit. And those RIF draws are going on until eventually the non-registered kind of flex pot is all gone, and we need to start tapping onto the TFSAs at that point, which we actually hadn't touched until now. And the extra fun thing is that down here, we see this little pink dotted line. That's the annual amount of personal tax that we estimate Marty and Jen needing to pay every single year based on them taking income in this blended way. And I'll just note, like, take a look at how smooth this is, right? There's no peaks, there's no valleys. If we pop into the software over here, we can see that their marginal tax rate is expected to be about 28%, nearly the entire way through their plan, and no expectation of any OAS clawback issues along the way either. Just a total clean bill of health. It's a thing of beauty. So now that you know the 4 RSP withdrawal strategies that are effective for reducing taxes, hopefully you find you're just better equipped to save on taxes by implementing one or maybe a couple of these different approaches. Now, every single person's situation is going to be different. I can't account for your exact situation here on this video. We do this stuff all the time though, so if you want our team to help you kind of one-to-one, just click the link in the description below and we'll book a time on the calendar for us to chat. We look forward to that. Otherwise, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.